We have this really uncomfortable hard green couch here and right in the front door of our office. And I will go sit there with this brown portfolio and a pen when I need to think or solve a problem or think about that 90-day view versus that 2 or 3 day view. I'll go recline on that thing with my feet up and I'll get a blank piece of printer paper or 2 or 3 and just go for 30 or 45 minutes, and people walk by and be like, "Oh, Frazer, you must be solving a problem." Yeah. And people know I'm on the hard green couch. Probably don't come talk to me because I'm trying to get in the zone here.
All right. Well, Frazer, welcome to the show. It's good to talk to you today.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. Really excited to be here joining you.
Well, you and I have known each other for quite a long time. We worked together, 15 years or so ago, and we've stayed in touch in the decade plus since then. And, something that really jumped out to me then when we worked together was you have an uncanny ability to execute, which is distinct from many other people who are in the workplace. You just simply have this magical ability to get things done. And I'm curious how you would describe your execution philosophy. Maybe you've not written for public consumption Frazer's Guide to Getting Things Done at this point, so it could be some combination of intentionality and just hardwiring. But I'm curious how you think about that. Like, how do you go about deciding what to get done and how to approach executing it?
Great topic. And I think most really good operators are generally born with an operator's brain. And I think that's what I was born with. When I look at, my talents and compared to my siblings or whatnot, I think most really true hardcore operators just come into this world with that. And if they happen to be at the right companies that helps hone that skill, that certainly helps as well. Probably for the past 8 or 10 years, I've thought about my job as essentially having I have to do 5 things. I have to hire good people, I have to set the strategy, I have to monitor the behaviors, I have to measure the results, and I have to model the culture. And I can apply that to any leadership position, but at its highest level, that's what I'm hired to do. If you click down below that, I've tried to think about operations as what's right in front of me and what's here and here. And visually, I'm putting one hand right in front of my face and one hand out, fully extended. And the hardest part of a good operator is to balance the here and now, which is what do I need to do in the next few days versus what are the initiatives that I need to focus on for the next maybe 90 days. And the companies I've been with have typically been, it's hard to look past 90 days just because they're earlier stage or more growth companies. And looking past 90 days, you're kind of fooling yourself. So balancing that very near term, but also really carving out time to have thoughtful sit down with a pen and piece of paper and map out the 90-day strategies has been helpful for me.
As I hear you talk about that, you've got these 5 categories, and I can almost envision in my mind a table of maybe the vertical axis of the 5 categories, and then you've got 2 columns, right now and the next 90 days.
I also think about it almost like a pie chart of based on where the team is, the company, the organization, how do I need to allocate my time and energy across those 5 things? And if I need to hire up some people, then that pie chart might get bigger on that piece of pie might get bigger. If I need to do more shadowing of staff to monitor behaviors and I need to drive up to Kentucky and drive around with some of our care team because I've got an intuition that things aren't working the way corporate thinks they will, then maybe that pie needs to get bigger. So kind of always flexing, like how do I need to allocate that time and energy?
With those 5 categories, you indicated that it changes over time, just depending on the situation. What takes the most energy from you? On average, have you seen one of those categories be more dominant for you?
Usually the hiring good people is fairly lumpy. You're either staffed up or you're not. And I would kind of also put hire and inspire good people into that one. So that one's maybe a little more run rate. Probably the one that I emphasize the most is measuring the results and, defining the KPIs that are going to be the flywheel of the business, having the management reports that are accessible out of Power BI or whatever system you use, having the forums, the monthly operating reviews or the weekly one-on-ones or whatever it may be for operations. That really is keeping your finger on the pulse of the business. So that one's probably the most that I lean in on too. I love monitoring the behaviors. I love going out, not as Frazer, the COO, but I go out as Frazer, the new guy in training, and hang out with our care team and interact with members. And, I think a lot of senior leaders just skip that. You kind of get into your your seed and you think you have people to do that for you. But, I've gotten more product development, solution improvement, inspiring the people by actually being out there. And I always come back with 2 pages of notes around, oh, we thought our technology was great, but if you go sit with somebody and they have to click 82 times to get from this screen to that screen, and you can sit there and say, why do you go from that screen to this screen? And your employee will say, that's just what I do. But some product development engineer could change that in a matter of weeks. So I really enjoyed that part.
We tend to accept too easily what our constraints are when they actually could be changed. We assume we will cause trouble if we say, hey, there's too many clicks here. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that complainer, but you're picking up on that by going out and sitting with them. And, and it's interesting in my experience, because you mentioned, a lot of leaders don't do that. And I can think of being in leadership roles where there's a lot coming at me. There's a lot of meetings. There's a lot of internal political factors in play that I'm trying to get my arms around. And I know that if I go out and sit next to somebody doing the work, I'm going to get insight, but no one's asking me to do it. And it's really easier not to do it. How do you keep it in mind? How do you make it a priority to make that a part of your role?
I think it's cultural. Like we try to be a company in which our senior leaders go out to the field. And so that helps just reinforce it. So for me, and then I enjoy it. So kind of that makes it easier to do as well. I think going back to the employees, and employees don't gravitate towards raising their hand because a lot of them come from companies that had crappy culture where it's like, don't keep your head down, stay off the radar, don't challenge the boss. I have tried to be the total opposite of, corporate or Nashville. We don't know everything. We're going to come up with a 70% answer, and I need you to tell me what's wrong with this. I need you to give me the 30%. I need you to have risk-free communication, candor, and actually celebrate the fact that, oh my gosh, so-and-so raised her hand and told us how bad this part of Pathways was. And, now we've gone back to the engineering team and fixed it. And if you think about it, every problem at every company is seen by some employee at some point. All of them. They may not know that it's a problem. They may just think, well, I clicked from this screen to that screen and it takes 18 clicks, or they don't feel like they can raise their hand. So culturally to say, our success is based on the rate at which we surface and solve problems. And if we can have a competency as a business at surfacing and solving problems really, really quickly, then we will beat the competition or delight our customers faster or not run out of money or whatever the clock is ticking on you. There's some clock that's always ticking. So if you can make that speed to ideation or iteration like a really competitive advantage, it can be pretty cool.
That's a very powerful mantra, that we are here to solve problems and everybody sees what the problems are. When I think about the teams that I've worked on the best teams that I've worked on, the environment was, let's get the problems on the table. And everyone has a different perspective. And once you do that, it's a multiplying effect. It's not 2 people plus 2 people equals 4 people working on things. It's almost 2 plus 2 equals 8. So that's a very, very how often do you find yourself having to remind people that that's the case?
All the time.
Why is that, do you think?
I think there's so much bad culture out there that you have to undo maybe decades of wiring of somebody, and they need to see some positive reinforcement on challenging the norm or breaking the rules or raising their hand. And then I think you have employees who may be new to kind of having a corporate office or a corporate component to the business and think, oh, the higher ups know everything. And I'm like, the higher ups don't know everything. Like, all of our product development is going to come from you guys. So, but then you got to walk the walk. So you need to go back and have the product development or the solution improvement or the engineering team actually take some of what they've heard and seen and put it into action. And then then it becomes like almost a flywheel, because somebody opens up the technology platform and they're like, oh my gosh, like that thing is fixed. And you get a little shot of positive reinforcement there.
Yeah, I think you're touching on another challenge that affects many businesses is you think that you can come up with a solution in a conference room and then just launch the solution and you're good. There's a professor at Stanford named Steve Blank who likes to say no business plan survives first contact with customers, referring to the fact that we have to be out on the quote unquote battlefield in order to see reality. We can't see reality from the conference room. And that seems to be you're organizing your approach and mobilizing your team along the same sort of philosophical concept.
Yeah, for sure. We have a product development or product improvement team here called Solution Improvement, and they are really good at going out and to the field and observing and shadowing and listening and coming back and building those relationships. So, they know here comes Rachel Close or Kate Johnson or Joel, and they're excited to have those people come out. And it's not, oh, here comes corporate to tell me what to do. They're like, great, I've got some suggestions for you. And it works really well.
It strikes fear in the hearts of many people around the country to know that somebody from the mothership is about to appear on their day.
Yeah,
it sounds fantastic. Yeah,
exactly.
You've turned the corner on that. And you referred to earlier that most of your career you've spent working in high growth environments or startups, which are more immature. And in those environments, a real hallmark of them is that there's kind of a possibility orientation, not just merely an execution standpoint. And possibilities at war with focus. And a COO must focus in order to be successful. So there's a real tension there. First, I guess the first question, I'd like to ask you more questions about this, but the first question is, what do you think causes so many CEOs to have such a large appetite towards accumulating initiatives?
Yeah, shiny things. I've got a little bit of a shiny thing mentality that I've had to learn to transcend, especially over the past decade, and continue to grind on the original ideas more than you bail on them and flip to the new ideas. I think the hard part about these early stages is you don't know. You don't know what works. I mean, there's a little bit of a naive entrepreneurial mantra of never give up, but that's not the reality. Sometimes you do need to turn something off. Sometimes you do need to put the stop and stop, continue, and back off on things. So knowing how much to continue to lean in and persevere through figuring it out versus trying something new. I don't know. That's one of the hardest things. I think experience will definitely help around, hey, have I done something somewhat on the dartboard similar to this in the past? And if I've done care management, for example, in the past in the healthcare world, but it looked a little bit different, but I know that works and I need to apply that here to this, different subsector of healthcare, then you've kind of got a belief that you'll figure it out. But it's definitely hard. I think there's a difference in a strategic pivot and accumulating shiny things. So you can be wise and do a strategic pivot, but not have to go after every idea that you have. It's also to have a good ELT or good leadership team that you bounce ideas off of and listen to those folks.
It sounds like what you're saying. Part of it is I don't know what's going to fail, so I kind of need a hedge. So I'm going to put in flight several different initiatives. And it's really hard to know when you've gone beyond focus and you've been trapped into the shiny object mentality, because there is a good rationale for having more than one initiative. In case initiative A fails, you've still got initiative B. That's part of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, that's part of it. I would say at the same time, iteration is much easier than ideation. So it's easier to take, I think in terms of these companies or these solutions, is 0 is day one, I've got an idea, and 100% is this solution or service is totally mature and it's flushed out and all the KPIs fire every month and this thing is on autopilot. To me, I like companies that kind of are in that 25% to 75 or 80% run, where you're not coming up with, here's a brand new idea, but you're taking something that exists, but there's still a lot of building runway left on it. And through that arc of something's 25% mature versus 80% mature, you do a lot of ideation in the early stage, but you try to stop doing ideation and you move to iteration. So we're doing the same thing, but we're tweaking the edges versus we're no longer doing this thing and we're doing a new idea, a new service or solution.
So you're not changing your customer segment. You're not changing probably your value proposition. You're just enhancing on what you've got for that.
And you're not changing your service wholesale, but you're trying to find that you're trying to wring the towel on, okay, we've gotten this thing to this stage of KPI. How do we get 2 enrollments per day to 3.5 enrollments per day per FTE? And that's iteration versus we should stop doing enrollments altogether and we should go do something else. it's kind of nice when you make that transition from less ideation and more iteration.
You also mentioned that an effective executive leadership team is crucial to navigating how much do you take on? How do you balance focus across different potentially competing initiatives? And you've worked at enough companies that you've seen a variety of approaches there. What have you seen makes it possible for an ELT to come together and decide we're doing these things and we're not doing these other things?
Depending on the stage of the company, sometimes you can't afford a full ELT and you got to fund your way into an ELT. Once you have the boxes checked, a CEO, a COO, a VP of finance or a CFO, a head of HR, a chief customer or kind of account management. I think we do frequent offsites where we get out of the office and we don't call it a strategic plan. We call it something else, but that's kind of like a strategic plan, but it's really our North Star around here are the 8 categories that we're going to focus on within the work, which range from growth to employee engagement or turnover and everything in between. And, here's what success would look like and kind of cascade from there. And so we keep coming back to those offsite sessions and those that document to say, do we still want to have these things on here? What's changed in the past quarter or 5 months or so? Is this one at a 2 or is this one at a 5? And so that's really helpful to pull away from the business, get outside of the office, even build some connective tissue where you know each other and, it's not kind of all business for the sake of business.
If a company were to say to you, we're too busy to do offsites, we'll just do it in our conference room, what would you tell them to try to persuade them to keep it to an offsite?
I just think there's something about a different environment that sparks creativity, and try to solve a problem at your desk in front of your computer with email and Teams popping up versus go sit in the courtyard with a pen and a piece of paper. I guarantee you will have more creativity, and you just need to separate yourself. And there's something about the environment that will either slow you down and be less stimulating or kind of clear the deck. So you don't have to go to the Adirondacks. You don't have to go to the Hudson Valley. Just go to a hotel room and rent a small conference room or go outside or go somewhere. But there's something different about leaving your corporate office.
Yeah, I think it's such a valuable and somewhat hidden insight. I've noticed just in myself that I don't even notice my environment. I don't even notice the distractions from technology until I'm trapped at a baseball tournament with my kids and I have a notebook and really nothing else. And then it's like, wow, this was such a more productive ideation session.
Yeah, we have this really uncomfortable hard green couch here and right in the front door of our office. And I will go sit there with this brown portfolio and a pen when I need to think or solve a problem or think about that 90-day view versus that 2 or 3 day view. I'll go recline on that thing with my feet up and I'll get a blank piece of printer paper or 2 or 3 and just go for 30 or 45 minutes, and people walk by and be like, oh, Frazer, you must be solving a problem. Yeah. And people know I'm on the hard green couch. Probably don't come talk to me because I'm trying to get in the zone here. And
that's fantastic. And the feedback
it's 40. I can see it from my office here.
The feedback that you're getting suggests what it seems to me, which is that's fairly rare to do something like that. And do you worry that with more and more prevalence of using AI, that sort of activity becomes farther and farther removed from executives and people trying to be intentional and have high quality thought?
Yeah, high quality thought is extremely necessary and more rare today. And AI is part of it, but it's also work follows you everywhere. Work email on your phone, Teams on your phone, easy to open your laptop at 7:00 at night. And so deep thought, like deep thinking or focused problem solving on a body of work is more and more rare these days. And I schedule it on my calendar. I will block specific time to go, not just like ad hoc, let me go think, totally open-minded, but I need to go spend 45 minutes working on a 90-day operations plan. That is blocked from 2 to 3 o'clock on, whatever day. And so that, to me, that I need that sort of discipline to make me use that time only for that piece of work or that body of work.
Yeah, that's scheduled time. That's the way to handle it, isn't it? And when you do that, do you force yourself to get away from kind of your office setup, or is it dependent on certain things? Or
it depends. If I need to do a mid-year performance check-in. I need to be sitting in my desk, and that's fine. But I'm not going to do that and check email at the same time. If I need to, create a board slide deck for I need to be in front of my computer. If I need to strategize more around, where to take our solution or service for this part of the business, then I can go sit on the green couch and I need to be in a different environment. So it really depends.
Yeah, I've found even some of that, like a board slide, for instance. Obviously, you've got to be in front of a computer screen to create the actual slide. But I learned a trick. There's a lady named Nancy Duarte who wrote a book called Slideology and a couple follow-up books about the art of presentations. And I saw a video of her interviewing someone else talking about this, and they were illustrating the point. Like, if you sit down with a piece of paper to make a slide and you don't even use any words, you just draw, even if you don't know how to draw a picture of what you want to communicate. And then round 2 is add words to it. And then round 3 is go to your computer and build the actual slide. And I have found that to be a quite clarifying exercise for me.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And as a seasoned old veteran, I actually don't. One of the benefits of being a seasoned old veteran is I don't have to create my slides anymore. I only sketch them out on a piece of printer paper and ghost them out, and then hand them to some eager junior person who is much better at it than I am. But yeah, it's so much easier to develop the storyline and the goal and the messaging when you're not thinking about, oh, I need a triangle here and I need the right font here and I need the right rectangle. You're separating the construction of the construction of the visuals from the messaging itself. And if you just do exactly what you said, you can focus on what am I trying to convey with this piece of paper here. So I love that.
And just to emphasize, I don't think of you as an old veteran. In fact, we're the same age, so I can't accept that. but I do get what you're saying. Like, there's benefits to having more experience and more age.
And even if you can accept it, Nathan, you may have to accept that we are
at some point. It's inevitable.
We are at the higher end. It's amazing. I walk around and I'm like, I'm in the upper echelon of age here.
It's wild. It's wild how that can happen. I still feel young, but exactly. You mentioned earlier that you've typically worked in growth environments most of your career. What's going on inside of you that shifts your attention away from being part of a much larger organization and pursuing opportunities at more emergent ones?
Probably my ADD. It's what's behind it. I have always needed variability to be fulfilled and content, personally and professionally. So I have my hands in a lot of things across the board, and doing the same fewer things in a smaller box at a bigger company just never appealed to me as much as doing more things in a bigger box at a smaller company. So that's part of it, is needing variability. And the other is I love building. I'm a builder and an improver, maybe more of an improver than a builder, but having the runway to that 20% to 80%, that 25% to 80% run, it gives me a lot more enthusiasm than kind of the towel wringing of the last 5 or 10% is all like super lean Six Sigma or micro additions to customer sales or whatever it may be. So
creating something is much more important to you than optimizing how it runs. Yeah. And you're in healthcare. So healthcare is unique. And let's just speak from an organizational environment. Healthcare is unique in that you have clinical roles that are a part of it. And so you work with clinicians. Clinicians come from a totally different background of training than us business people do. What have you seen? I'm just curious, like, if anyone with a clinical background is listening to this, what would you advise them of how they could be more effective at getting through to us hard-headed business people who might be thinking more in terms of cash flow statements and growth targets and KPIs?
Yeah, I mean, I think I believe that there is an intersection of business goals and good patient care, and those can exist in the same room, and they can be very aligned if done the right way. And so thinking about, performance of readmission rates or whatever the business outcome that you're trying to achieve, that can sit in the same room comfortably with patient care. And you can reduce avoidable unnecessary healthcare costs and provide great patient care. So, the best clinicians I've seen are the ones that understood the business goals and advocated for the patient goals, but brought those two things together and said, okay, let's reduce unnecessary healthcare costs because no one wants to go to the hospital for an emergency room visit. So if we have a goal of reducing emergency room visits, that's actually good for the patient. And yes, we benefit as a business because we're under some sort of reimbursement model that rewards reducing ED visits, but that's not the devil, just because we have a goal of reducing unnecessary healthcare costs.
And sometimes those clinical leaders have the right intentions, but they don't come across the right way. So as you think about over the course of your career where you've seen clinical leaders kind of lose credibility, what are the one or two things that you would suggest that they do differently that might help them regain credibility?
Yeah, and I think understanding the business side.
It's getting back to business goals and context building.
Biggest piece, and context building. And not being, we have a saying, we're a member-centric company. So we serve members or patients, and we will all sacrifice for the member, not the employee. Yes, we're an employee-centric, but if push comes to shove, we're going to put the member before ourselves. And a lot of clinical companies feel like they have to cater to clinicians, doctors, or whoever. It's like, oh, don't upset the docs because the docs are the docs. If the docs are God, well, who is the end patient? And that is actually, we're going to be patient-centric. And that might mean we have to work until 6 o'clock tonight seeing patients. Or that might mean we're going to staff a weekend shift. Or that might mean Frazer, the COO, needs to step in and run the Kentucky market for 6 months because our person didn't work out. And those are all member-centric decisions that we make. And that kind of universal halo gives you a lot of air cover to do the right thing for, whoever it is in healthcare, your end customer or the end beneficiary of your service. But I remember several companies and several moments where it was like, we can't do that because the nurse practitioners won't like it or the docs won't like it. And I'm like, they're important, but they are secondary the same way I'm secondary to our end patient and user. And if we ruffle a few feathers or we lose some, but the member is better and our customer is happier, then so be it.
That's great. You just reframe it to focus on who we're trying to serve. I think that's really helpful. I'd like to shift topics and ask you about something a little different from your day-to-day that you're involved with. I think most people, perhaps people who would see you, your LinkedIn profile or meet you at a conference would assume that you're a highly logical, data-driven COO, and you've got attributes of that. But there's another side to you, a creative side. And you, over the last few years, have gotten more involved outside of your role as COO in pursuing an art hobby. Describe a little bit what you're doing.
Yeah, so you're right. I'm very much a left brain person, probably on the surface. I've always had a creative side that emerged either through the types of companies I like to work for that had more creativity or, kind of travel or adventure. There's always a creative outlet. So anyway, what I've been doing now for amazingly 10 years, I call it more than a hobby, but less than a profession, is making actual art in a couple of different ways. I started making sculptures with limestones. This will sound totally random, but that's kind of the beauty of art is often it is very, very random. But I would find limestones in certain creeks in Middle Tennessee that had the certain depth and rate of water flow. And occasionally when that happened, it would create these amazing natural water features and watermarks on these stones. Very naturally beautiful. Kind of think about slot canyons in Utah on a miniature scale built by water flowing over stones or something like that. And there may only be, 3 or 4 of these stones over a 1 mile stretch of a certain type of creek. And so I started finding those and using an electric Dremel with different types of diamond tipped bits to kind of work with those stones. And then it did kind of grew from there. So did all with no particular shape, very abstract and kind of modern and natural. And then I started evolving into canvas pieces. I thought, I wonder if I smash these smaller stones of all a uniform color with a sledgehammer, and then I somehow glued them to a canvas in kind of a modern way. I bet that would look really cool. And so then I started doing canvas pieces. And it must resonate with someone because I've been doing it for 10 years and people generally buy them almost as soon as I finish with them, and they're reasonably priced for artwork. I'm not giving them away, but I'm not robbing people. And so, yeah, I think they resonate because they're natural, but they're also pretty contemporary and modern at the same time.
So you take these stones and it's based on the depth and rate of water in a creek. Like, say more about that. Like, how deep, how fast is the water moving?
Yeah, the sweet
Are
spot
you
is,
using goggles to find them in the water, or is the water low enough?
yeah. And I've done all types of stones. That was a later evolution. Originally, I just started with general limestones because when you remove parts of the surface, there's different layers of colors, and you could do some really interesting, kind of cool, modern, but natural looking things with them. And then I would mount them on a steel stand. And I've done small tabletop ones. I've done one that was probably 800 pounds and required a tractor to remove it from the creek and required a crane. It took me a year to finish and required a crane to install it on a 5-foot steel rod poured in 17 cubic feet of concrete in someone's garden. So a huge variety of them. But the sweet spot on the water seems to be about knee to quad deep with enough kind of drop to have consistent current. And then it just needs to be randomly in the right, there needs to be a limestone shelf or something like random there. And that's kind of part of the fun now as I'm doing those types of stones is to, see if there's something there. And so I've got them kind of marked in a notebook all over the place where I'll just see one, and either if I don't need to take it out and use it, I'll leave it there and put a mark in a notebook around where it is and come back 2 years later. And it's just getting better over time.
And you mentioned you use a Dremel to shape the rock. And a Dremel, for people who don't know, is something like similar to a drill, but it gives you more precision over shaping things. Would that be an accurate description, or would you modify that?
Yeah, that's good. Mine has and I use a bunch of tools, mainly Dremel for the sculptures, but it has a flexible, probably 2 or 3 foot extension on it. So I can angle it and get down to all types of little nooks and crannies. And the diamond tipped bits that you use have different sizes and shapes for different types of things. But then I'm also using, to do that big one, I had to rent a coring device that would core a 2-inch diameter hole 3 feet inside of this stone that was gas powered and water cooled because it sat down on this 5-foot steel rod. And so it's all different types of equipment. That I've got different equipment to smash the stones and sift the different sizes, and then kind of a proprietary way of getting them to adhere to the canvas if I'm doing the canvas pieces. So that's the fun part, is I just let it go wherever it can go.
Yeah. And I memean, it sounds like there's a different type of challenge the bigger the piece is and the bigger the equipment is that you have to use with this. Does that factor into this at all?
Yeah. I mean, if it's a large one, it really needs to be a commission because I don't want to commit a year to something. And
yeah.
Our house and yard are already filled with a lot of my art. So, and I mainly do it so I can do more of it. Again, more than a hobby, less than a profession. I'm trying to, the more I can clear out, the more I can create, which is.
When you look at a rock, how do you decide your approach to shaping it? What happens? Like, how do you read this thing and make these decisions?
Sometimes I'll start with the idea and then go find the stone. One that I do is we'll take kind of more of a classic rectangular shaped stone. I'll leave a strip in the middle and I'll take off all of the outsides. And people always think it's 3 stones. I'm like, how did you get those 3 stones together? And I'm like, that's 1 stone. But I've taken the sides off, which creates this really neat contrast of the original exterior on this middle strip and the interior on the sides of it. So sometimes it's idea and then find the stone to match it. Sometimes it's find the stone. But usually, so I have tons of materials waiting that are sitting there, and sometimes I'll just leave them sitting for a while, and then the idea will come to me. Mostly I have a backlog of 15 ideas that I'm waiting to do, and I've already figured it out. So usually comes pretty quickly.
And you said you've been doing this for about 10 years. If you go back 10 years ago, where do you find inspiration? Are there stone workers that are doing comparable art pieces? Like this idea, was it influenced? And to what extent was it just out of thin air?
Yeah. I did a very more rudimentary version of this in my 20s, just as a hobby before really getting into my work career, and then put it on the shelf just I don't know. And so I don't really know what brought it back to me. It's kind of the cliche of
The muse.
needed to get out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I try not to look at other artists because I don't want to copy anybody else. And so I like to look at other artists that are not doing similar type of work from me just for inspiration, but I don't really want to see other people working with stone or ceramics or, even some canvas type of work. So I think most of my inspiration is just, I love the singular focus of it. I can't check email. I can't multitask. Can't even listen to music because I've got a mask on. I've got ear protection. I've got eye protection, gloves on. So I think most of my muse is just kind of going into a zone or a state of flow and solely focusing on something for 3 hours at a time. And especially if you're focusing on something like 1 square centimeter at a time, or if I'm doing a canvas work, maybe 1 square inch at a time, our concentration that's so rare to be that concentrated on something in such a singular way. So
what's been most challenging about this hobby of yours?
probably keeping it pure, not trying to make art that sells, but trying to make art that is truly what I think is interesting and creative. And that's part of the beauty of it not being a profession is I don't have financial pressure to sell art to pay the bills, which I think gives more, if you're not trying to sell art, you're not thinking about making art that sells, and then you can take more risks. You can be more creative. You might end up throwing some pieces away, but you also will have, I think, more breakthroughs and create better art. So staying true to that, because, it was very surprising and I had some imposter syndrome of, I'm not really an artist. Like, I'm self-taught, but people are buying this stuff. And I've done several shows and it appeals to people. So someone likes it for some reason, but not letting that flip over into, oh, I should start making stuff that I think people will want to purchase versus like stick to your, be true to yourself, be true to just the creative process and what you think is neat or special or interesting or different. And if someone wants to buy it, great. If they don't, then I'm still going to be able to pay the gas bill. But that's a very hard kind of line to stand by.
What helps you stay true to yourself?
Man, that's a question that's bigger than art.
Yeah.
I think just having some awareness of what my blind spots are and trying to reflect on what those blind spots are and, be conscious around, okay, you're trying to do this to, for the wrong reasons, whether it's sell art or show up to a cocktail party this way or, whatever it happens to be, like continue to stay true to yourself.
It's such a common human problem. You've made it, and not intentionally, but you've made it more obvious by having it apply to your art. So you can actually, there's something tangible, there's a physical quote unquote product. And the way you are developing that product is either going to be true to yourself or it's going to be in service of fame, perhaps. Maybe is that the competing force?
Yeah, I think it's not to try to be known as something. Like anytime I want to be known as a blank, that's when I get into dangerous territory. Like to be known as versus just be. And so that's the slippery slope of, I want to be seen as an artist, or I want to be seen as this type of artist, or I want people to say I'm good. We seeking that affirmation versus just do your thing. Just go out in the backyard and roll up your sleeves and see where this thing takes you.
Earlier we were talking about career, and people often have that as a part of their calculus in career. I'm going to try to become the best investment banker in the world, but really they don't have any interest in that. They just like the status that the person has. So that's kind of the same thing playing out vocationally. We're all competing with that. So it's really interesting to hear how you describe navigating
my career and my line of thinking 20 years ago, and that's exactly where I was.
Me too. Yeah.
I want to accomplish this title or this level or this amount of compensation or whatever. And you just grow up. I mean, at some point you grow up and realize.
Some people do.
Yeah, some people do. Or, life hands you a couple of hard things and you realize what's important, and you find that awareness. But
how do you see the world differently now? How has art shaped you? You've been shaping some rocks. How has that process shaped you as a person?
If I were to say, if I didn't make art, I don't know what I would be doing. My kids are older. Like, I don't know what I would do on a Saturday or Sunday. Really, I mean, I spend a lot of time doing this. And, sadly, less time driving to soccer games and whatnot. But I think it's just been eye-opening that life can continue to unfold for you. And don't put yourself in a box. Don't assume that, this is all I am, and continue to let your life unfold as it progresses. And especially as you get older, and it's easier to kind of say, oh, I'm an old dog and, there's no new tricks here. But be open to those things, and be open to, like, I don't care if this goes anywhere or not. And, I'm gonna do this thing, and maybe I'll create some community around it. Maybe I'll find some, more contentment and pleasure out of it. So that's kind of it.
What communities has this pulled you into as you've gotten into it?
There is a really cool group of creative people, artists and creative people, and everywhere. But in Nashville, it's been really fun to meet a bunch of people and do a couple of shows with some of them, and just learn what I'm always intrigued as an operator. What's your process? What's your studio look like? How do you get in the vibe of creativity? Do you do it on a Tuesday night, or do it on a Saturday morning? And, how do you get your materials? So that's been really fun to see different types of people, whether it's another sculptor or a jewelry designer or somebody who makes hat bands or whatever. These are people that I've met around the United States, and having kind of the right questions to ask to explore with those folks has been interesting to see, what are other people doing in this space as well. And I wouldn't come across those people. They're not in healthcare circles, and not in, those circles. So that's just kind of broadening the world.
Given the variety that you talked about enjoying in work context, it seems like that would be very life-giving as well, to have a variety of people come out of this. And how has it shaped the way you approach your work today? 10 years of art development certainly must influence in some way how you approach your day job, your quote unquote left-brained day job that's very logical. What have you seen there? What have you noticed?
Honestly, they're actually pretty distinct. There's probably been some crossover, maybe in the more singular focus, try not to be as, sometimes multitasking or getting a lot of work done in a short period of time is very good. Sometimes that's not. So, but it's much more subtle. I don't think about work while I'm doing art. So I don't lift that up and move it over as naturally. It may be a little more subtle behind it, but that would probably be it. But they're pretty distinct, and I try to keep them pretty distinct.
Yeah, that seems like maybe part of the reason behind all of this is to have distinct pursuits. Yeah.
Exactly.
You mentioned earlier old dog learning new tricks. Don't be, essentially, you didn't say this, I'm interpreting this as, don't delude yourself into thinking that an old dog can't learn new tricks. And along those lines, for someone who finds themselves in a stage of career that they're really not satisfied with, what would you advise that they think about, or what questions might you ask them? Any advice or thoughts there?
I mean, I've used this analogy with a lot of people over the years. Your career is really a funnel. And when you graduate from college, it's wide open. And you can go work on Wall Street and finance, or you can go to Tibet and be a sheep herder. And it's everything in between. And you start somewhere. And through a process of selection and elimination, you move through this funnel, and you get tighter and tighter. And you say, I like finance, but I hate New York. So I'm going to do finance in Charlotte. And then I like finance in Charlotte, but I don't like accounting. I like M&A. So I'm going to do M&A finance in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then you slowly start to hone in on through a process of selection and elimination. And I always tried to do like a 12 to 18 month pull up and just say, again, get a piece of paper and go sit on the hard green couch or the courtyard or wherever, and think about, what do I like? What do I not like? What am I good at? What am I not good at? What do I like about this company? Do I think this is a place I want to be for another 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, and try to do some reflection on that. And then if the answer is no, I don't think I want to be here, or I don't think this role is the right fit for me, or I do want to get deeper into that funnel, you have to be ridiculously intentional and aggressive about solving that problem. And my dad used to say, make a job out of getting a job. And so I remember when I was transitioning from one company in my past to another, and I knew where I wanted to go. It was Healthways, where you and I worked together. I went and I did so much research on Healthways. That was the company I wanted to work for. I did tens of hours of research. I read everything on the website, every K1, every PowerPoint presentation, everything I could find. And I went in the conference room at lunch every day for 4 months and practiced my interview skit that I was going to give whenever I got an interview there. That's what I mean by don't tiptoe into the next step. Like you got to get majorly aggressive on where you're going after and be the most prepared person who's ever walked into that company to interview for any position ever. That should be your bar. And it might not happen in 1 week, but it might happen in 6 months or 12 months. And maybe you have a train stop somewhere else to get there. So I think people need to you just got to do a lot of work to make that transition after a lot of reflection at the same time.
What you're describing is counterintuitive to most people. They think if they commit in one direction, they're ruling everything else out. So they try to hold back. And what you're saying is maybe something works out great. But if it doesn't, there's a serendipity that's going to happen. It's going to take you somewhere.
Yeah. And here's the goal at the end of that funnel that we all aspire to get to, but we're not entitled to it. It's the intersection of three things. To do work that we're good at. For me, that's operations. In an industry that you love, and to be well compensated. And if you can get all three of those, then work doesn't feel like work. That's kind of the cliche, but it's true. Or you kind of spring out of bed in the morning, and you're not going to get those when you're age 22. Hopefully you get those when you're age 52, but you might not. You may only get one or you may get two. But if you're thoughtful and reflective and you hustle, you might get to three at some point deep into that funnel. And when I say healthcare is an industry that I love, yes, is it probably the top choice for me? I don't know. There's no one singular place, but I would say I'm at least at a 2.5, at least a 3, at least a 2.5, maybe a 3 on the intersection of those three things now. But it's taken a lot of time and work and luck and good fortune and great bosses and managers and colleagues and peers that have helped get there. But to me, that's kind of like the farthest point of what contentment could look like from a professional standpoint.
And from your art perspective, where do you see the next decade going with it?
I would love to kind of recharge the creative side of it. I would love to move that from a little more than a hobby. So it's more than a hobby, but I would like to continue to move it to a little more than a hobby. If I could eventually back down on the left brain side and pull up the right brain side, whether that's probably not like open a studio or anything like that, or, a gallery or anything. But if I think about X number of hours in the week, I would love to have more time allocated to art than I have today. I would love to go train. I've said I was self-taught. I would love to go train and educate and study, not in like a 2-year undergrad or anything like that, but, in some of these kind of either do an apprenticeship or go to some of these kind of creative programs where you can go for a month or something like that. I would love to go do some of those in different parts of the country where you can really clear the deck for yourself or go do an apprenticeship with somebody else doing something. So that takes time, but that's really what success would look like for me.
Well, your art is beautiful, and looking at it, I have found it fresh and somehow relaxing to my mind and spirit. So I appreciate you sharing it with the world, and I look forward to seeing how it evolves over the next decade and more.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate
Where can people go to see it?
The best place is probably for the most updated is Instagram, which is just at @FBuntin. I do have a website, but those are always outdated for artists. We're very bad at putting new work up there, but you can see new work, which is just from FrazerBuntin.com. But the latest and greatest is Instagram. And I do a pretty good job of putting it out there on that. So yeah, come take a look.
Well, thank you, Frazer, and thanks for the conversation today.
Yeah, Nathan, always a pleasure to catch up with you, and feel like we share a lot of the same thoughts on the world and on the professional side of things. So
absolutely, yeah, thank you.